Evan Carter froze mid-swipe of his mop as Richard Hale, billionaire tech CEO, strode into the glass-walled conference room, waving a thick document stamped with a bold red seal. His voice cut sharply through the cluster of executives like a blade through tension. "Whoever can translate this proposal," Hale announced, slapping the pages dramatically onto the table, "gets my salary for the day, $31,600. The executives laughed, loud and overlapping, the sound bouncing off the marble floors. Hale nudged Evan's janitor card aside with the toe of his polished shoe, barely looking at him. Evan kept his eyes lowered. He always did. It kept him employed. Still, his heart hammered in his chest. The document was covered with complex Korean technical jargon, and though nobody here knew it, Evan was once fluent enough to interpret treaties before his father died, before his family fell apart, before everything collapsed, before the janitor uniform. "Maybe Google Translate can handle it," joked Mark Benson, the CFO, tapping his Mont Blanc pen on the table. "More reliable than whatever budget translator we'd find." More laughter. Evan's phone buzzed inside his pocket. He knew without looking what it was. Final eviction notice, 48 hours. Then he and his little sister, Mia, only 14, would be sleeping in their mom's old beat-up car. His stomach twisted. The exact amount they owed for back rent and late fees was $31,600. He swallowed hard, fingers brushing against the small metal object tucked in his pocket, an old translator pen his mother had given him before she passed, a relic from a life he no longer had access to, a world he'd buried under exhaustion, grief, and bills. He closed his eyes. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was oxygen. But could he reveal himself to these people, the same company that fired his father on false accusations and blacklisted him? Would stepping into the light save him or crush him? Would they laugh harder? Would they punish him? His breath shook. He slipped out of the conference room, unnoticed, unseen. As always. He hadn't always been invisible. When he was a bright-eyed kid growing up in Seattle, teachers used to pull him aside to show visiting parents the tiny genius who can switch between English, Spanish, and Korean like flipping a light switch. His Korean mother, Hannah, taught him characters through bedtime stories. His father, Daniel Carter, introduced him to legal terminology when he was just 7. Laughing at how Evan could pronounce words like jurisdictionally binding before he could whistle. For his 10th birthday, they gave him the translator pen, sleek silver metal, engraved with the Korean phrase, "Wisdom is a torch." He remembered that night clearly. His father sitting beside him, explaining trade agreements, his mother correcting his pronunciation with gentle taps on his forehead. 3 months later, Hale Technologies fired Daniel Carter without warning, claiming conflict of interest and breach of confidentiality, charges that were never proven but were enough to destroy his reputation. He never worked in corporate law again. Medical insurance gone. Income gone. The stress ate him until a heart attack finished the job. The Carters lost their home a year later. By 16, Evan was juggling 3 jobs to care for Mia. By 22, he was working nights as a janitor in the same company that ruined their family. He moved through its corridors like a ghost, but ghosts hear everything. Over 5 years, he learned. Hale cut retirement contributions while buying a $21 million penthouse. Benson stole credit for the Asian market projections from a junior analyst. The company claimed diversity, while 90% of leadership was white men from elite universities, and Hale Technologies was desperate to break into the Korean tech sector. Knowledge was power, but knowledge without power was a prison. And now an escape hatch had finally cracked open. At 11:48 a.m., he watched Hale pace, holding the Korean-stamped document like it might explode. "This is from Sung Tech Microsystems. They're offering us joint production rights for our new processor. This partnership could triple our market share in Asia." Gasps, murmurs, excitement. Then the blow. They sent it entirely in Korean. Our translation team is stuck in Seoul due to a canceled flight, and Sungtech wants a response in, he checked his watch, 48 hours. Evan's pulse quickened. 2 days, the same time span before he and Mia would be out on the street. "Not to worry," Benson said, puffing out his chest. "Software can handle the basics." Hale gave him a withering look. "This document contains proprietary architecture. One mistake could lead to a lawsuit or worse." He raised the document again, theatrically. "Anyone who can translate all 40 pages flawlessly gets my day's salary, $31,600. Another explosion of laughter. "Hell, even the janitor can try." Evan's mop paused mid-air. He swallowed the heat rising in his chest. When the executives left, grabbing their copies, he noticed 2 things. 1, they mistranslated the title itself. It didn't say strategic cooperation. It said exclusive production rights. 2, they were about to misinterpret Sungtech's entire intention. He should walk away, stay invisible, keep the tiny life he and Mia had duct-taped together. But the eviction notice kept flashing in his head, and something inside him, something long buried, finally snapped awake. That night, at 2:17 a.m. in his dark apartment, Mia asleep on the couch beside a stack of homework she'd done by flashlight, Evan opened the document. 40 pages of dense Korean technical, diagrams, thermal modeling protocols, contractual clauses with dangerous implications. He took out the translator pen. His mother's voice echoed, "Wisdom is a torch." He drew a deep breath. He was done being invisible. He began translating, word for word. But Evan didn't know that someone else in the company had already noticed the mysterious corrections appearing on the executive's drafts, corrections only a master translator could make. And that person had a very dangerous reason to keep the janitor silent. Evan returned to Hale Technologies on Saturday night, long after the offices had emptied, wearing his janitor uniform like armor. The badge around his neck granted him after-hours access, and nobody questioned a janitor working overtime, certainly not at a company where executives didn't look maintenance workers in the eye. The security guard at the lobby desk glanced up from his phone. "Long shift, Evan?" "Bills don't pay themselves," Evan replied, forcing a tired smile. The guard chuckled, waving him through. "Ain't that the truth?" Evan wheeled his mop bucket down the quiet halls, the fluorescent lights humming like a warning. He wasn't here to clean. He was here to test something. When he reached the 25th floor conference room, he slipped inside and shut the door behind him. The whiteboard was covered with messy notes, half-translated phrases, and glaring mistakes from the executive's earlier attempts. Evan cringed at the incorrect grammar, the misread characters, the absurd assumptions. They had no idea how badly they were getting it wrong. He took out his mother's silver translator pen. The faint sandalwood scent drifted upward, grounding him. Then he began correcting the worst sections, quietly, precisely, leaving small but unmistakably expert notes. He signed them with one word: Night Owl. Not enough to reveal the full translation, just enough to prove someone competent existed. just enough to see how the wolves reacted when they smelled something smarter than them in the room. He wiped down the table to maintain the illusion of cleaning, then slipped out. At 7 a.m. Sunday morning, Evan was back on shift. He pretended to clean the glass panels outside the conference room while listening to the executives gather inside. "Who the hell is Night Owl?" Finance Director Mark Benson snapped, pointing at Evan's corrections. "These changes are actually correct." "Don't look at me," VP of Product Eric Field murmured. "My Korean is limited to ordering fried chicken in Seoul." "Security says no unauthorized access last night, which means someone inside did this." A tense silence followed. Richard Hale finally exhaled sharply. "Whoever it is, they clearly know their stuff. Fix the rest of it, fast." As the executives leaned in to inspect Evan's notes, Mark straightened suddenly. "I can't take credit for everything," his expression shifted smoothly. "But yes, this section here, I did clean that up last night. Been studying Korean privately, didn't want to say anything until I was more fluent." Evan froze mid-wipe. Mark was stealing his work. Hale clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. Finally, some initiative. You're leading the translation team now." Evan looked away before anyone saw the fury burning in his eyes. He'd helped them, and they rewarded him by erasing him again? Invisible, useful, disposable. Not this time. Not anymore. By Sunday night, Evan had finished translating nearly half the proposal at home, working by the dim kitchen light while Mia slept. Technical terms, legal implications, thermal handling standards. He understood it all, because his father had taught him the fundamentals of semiconductor contracts before he was even 12. But when he reached a clause about labor optimization requirements, he went still. He reread it, then again. No, this couldn't be right. He translated slowly, word by carefully chosen word. The clause allowed Hale Technologies to lay off 400 workers at the manufacturing plant in exchange for lowered production costs. People with families, people like his father used to be, people who'd trusted this company. His breath shook. Sung Tech had hidden the clause behind complex Korean idioms, probably assuming Hale Technologies would use its internal experts to negotiate fairly. But Mark's incompetence, or something worse, had erased the nuance. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice and betrayal and revenge. Monday morning, Evan arrived early, eyes burning from no sleep. He slid more Night Owl notes under the boardroom door. Then he resumed his janitorial duties. At 10 a.m., a voice boomed across the floor. "We have a security breach." Every executive froze. Security Chief Paul Mercer stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Last night, cameras caught someone entering the conference room, but the angle doesn't show their face." Richard Hale frowned. "Could be a corporate spy? Or an employee desperate for attention," Mark added loudly, almost too loudly. Evan's jaw clenched. Security began interviewing staff, one by one. When his turn came, Evan played his role with painful precision, the quiet janitor who barely spoke English beyond cleaning instructions. "Do you understand the accusations?" Evan widened his eyes innocently. "No? Korean?" he said, faking broken English. Mercer sighed. "He's clear. Move on." But Mark Benson lingered in the doorway, his Harvard ring tapping rhythmically against the frame. "You know," Mark said softly, "you understand English perfectly when I tell you to scrub glass." Evan froze. "Maybe you understand more than you pretend." Before Evan could respond, Mark smiled like a shark. "Careful, secrets can be dangerous in a place like this." That evening, Evan returned to his locker. His chest tightened. It had been broken into, and the translator pen, his mother's last remaining gift, was gone. A voice behind him whispered, "Do you want this?" Mark Benson twirled the pen casually between his fingers. Evan lunged instinctively, but Mark pulled it back. "Careful now. Security already believes this could be used for corporate espionage," he said lightly. "I've filed a report." Evan's stomach dropped. "You stole it." "I confiscated it," Mark corrected. "Suspicious items need to be examined." "It's my mother's." "And your mother," Mark interrupted, lowering his voice, "has an expired immigrant visa, doesn't she?" Evan froze. "How did he—" "It'd be a shame if someone notified ICE. Little Mia would become a ward of the state." Rage surged so violently, Evan thought he might black out. But Mark only smiled wider. "That's what I thought. Stay in your place, janitor." Then he walked away, leaving Evan shaking. He had 48 hours to stop an eviction, a corporate disaster, a mass layoff, and a corrupt executive, and he no longer had the one item that gave him confidence or time. But he wasn't done yet, not even close, because Evan was about to break into the CFO's private office and discover a secret that could destroy the entire company, and him along with it.
Monday evening bled into night, the office floor growing silent as executives went home, oblivious to the chaos they had set in motion. Evan stayed behind under the guise of overtime floor polishing. His badge still granted full janitorial access, one advantage of being the invisible one. Invisible people weren't watched. Invisible people weren't suspected. Invisible people could do anything. At least that was what Evan told himself as he slipped down the hallway toward Mark Benson's private office. He needed answers. He needed his mother's translator pen back, and he needed evidence to expose Mark Benson before the man destroyed hundreds of lives, and Evan's. The office was locked. Of course it was. But Evan had keys. Janitors always did. His hand shook as he unlocked the door and stepped into the dimly lit room, closing it softly behind him. He moved fast, knowing security made rounds every 30 minutes. He searched Mark's desk drawers. Nothing. He checked the cabinets. Empty. Then he pulled out the bottom file drawer. His heart lurched. Inside was a folder labeled SungTech Negotiation Strategy, Confidential, Internal Use Only. He flipped it open. What he saw made his blood run cold. There were two versions of the contract inside. The real SungTech proposal, the one Evan was translating, and a doctored version, rewritten by Mark Benson himself. The edited version removed the retraining programs, exaggerated the profit margins, hid the mass layoffs, and suddenly altered several key technical specifications. Why? Then Evan saw the final page, a signed letter of intent. Mark Benson had been planning to sell the doctored document to a rival firm, Janitor Industries, for a confidential consulting fee of $1.4 million. Evan stumbled back, gripping the desk. Mark wasn't just incompetent or ruthless, he was betraying Hale Technologies entirely and framing Evan as the fall guy. Now Evan understood everything. The stolen translator pen, the bogus espionage report, the pressure, the threats, the sudden security investigations. Mark needed someone to blame, someone no one would defend, someone powerless, someone invisible. Evan. The janitor. The perfect scapegoat. His fists clenched. For the first time since his father died, Evan felt real fury, not fear, surge through him. He snapped photos of everything with his cracked phone screen.
Every forged clause, every altered phrase, every incriminating email chain. Then something else caught his eye. A security envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was a printed memo. Emergency termination recommendation. Employee Evan Carter. The memo claimed Evan had accessed confidential documents, tampered with security systems, and posed a credible espionage threat. It was signed by Mark Benson, CFO, Hale Technologies. Evan stood frozen. His termination was already drafted. He was already condemned. And worst of all, the memo said a copy had been forwarded to Department of Homeland Security, Immigrant Fraud Division. His breath hitched. They weren't just firing him. Mark was going to get their entire family deported. Mia, his 14-year-old sister, a U.S. citizen, terrified of being separated. His mother, already sick, traumatized, barely hanging on. Mark wanted them all gone, erased, just like his father had been. Evan's hand shook uncontrollably as he shoved the documents back exactly how he found them and quietly locked the office. He forced himself to walk down the hall at a normal pace, even though panic clawed at his lungs. In the empty stairwell, he finally let the panic wash over him. His knees buckled, his vision blurred, his breaths came short and sharp. He braced himself against the cold metal rail, fighting for composure. He needed a plan. He needed allies. He needed a miracle. But all he had was the truth and a nearly impossible deadline. The next morning, Evan reported to work exhausted, pale, and running on caffeine and sheer panic. Every sweep of the mop felt heavier, every breath tighter. The 48-hour clock ticked louder in his mind. Mia's text from school buzzed on his phone. "Did the landlord say anything? Are we okay? Do we have more time?" He typed back, "Working on it, I promise." He deleted the next sentence before sending it. "I don't know if we'll make it." He resumed mopping floors he had cleaned 1,000 times before, but today, every step felt like walking toward a cliff. At 10 a.m., security guards began pulling janitorial staff out of their duties for questioning. One guard approached Evan. "Carter, come with us." His stomach plummeted. He followed them into a small glass-walled office. Security Chief Mercer sat waiting, arms folded. "Sit." Evan obeyed silently. "We found a report filed about you. Claims you've been accessing confidential documents." Evan kept his expression neutral. "Janitors clean offices," he said quietly. "Sometimes papers are on desks. That's all." Mercer studied him with narrowed eyes. You, Mark Benson, believe you're the night owl." Evan's pulse hammered. He lowered his gaze, playing the role expected of him. "No, understand. I clean floors." Mercer sighed, frustrated. He didn't want to deal with the language barrier. "You're free to go," he finally said, "but stay available." Evan walked out with his heart still pounding. He had bought himself time, but not much. When he returned to his locker, he found a single item inside, his mother's translator pen. But attached to it was a note written in a smug, looping script he recognized instantly. "Careful, Carter. You're not as invisible as you think. Dash. Mark." Evan closed his eyes, gripping the pen. Mark had returned it because the damage was already done. Evan was cornered, trapped. Unless he fought back. Unless he used his father's training, his languages, his mind. Unless he did what Hale and Mark never expected him to do. Unless he stopped hiding. At 9 a.m. Wednesday, 24 hours before the SungTech deadline, Richard Hale stormed into an emergency meeting. Evan stood at the back, pouring coffee quietly. Mark Benson was center stage, presenting his mistranslated notes with unwarranted confidence. As you can see, Mark explained, SungTech is offering minimal quality control restrictions. Wrong. And requires only light staffing adjustments. Lie. Richard Hale nodded, absorbing every false word. Evan felt physically sick. Mark was sabotaging everything. Workers, contracts, the entire company. And Evan had one chance to stop him. One terrifying, irreversible chance. He stepped forward. His voice trembled. "Excuse me, sir." Every head turned toward him. Even Mark's smile froze. Richard Hale frowned. "Yes, the janitor has something to say?" Evan inhaled deeply. Then, for the first time in 5 years, he spoke clearly, confidently, and without hiding. "He's mistranslating everything." A shocked silence followed, and for the first time, Evan was visible. But Evan didn't know that by speaking up, he had triggered a chain reaction that would unleash the company's darkest secrets and cost someone their career before sunrise. For a long, breathless moment, nobody spoke. Every executive stared at Evan as if a piece of furniture had suddenly developed vocal cords. The janitor had dared interrupt a board-level translation briefing? Richard Hale slowly set down the document in front of him. "What did you say?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. Evan swallowed hard, but the words were already out. There was no going back. "I said, the translation is wrong." CFO Mark Benson scoffed loudly. "Oh, please. Hale, are we really entertaining this? The janitor thinks he's fluent in Korean now?" A few executives smirked, but others shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. Evan lifted his chin. "I'm fluent in Korean," he said plainly. "Spanish, too. I grew up learning all three." Mark's smile thinned. "That's ridiculous." "I'm not lying," Evan continued. His voice trembled, but he kept going. "I've been leaving notes as Night Owl to help fix the translation mistakes." Gasps broke around the room. Hale's brows shot upward. "You're the Night Owl?" Mark's pen clattered against the table. "Sir," Mark sputtered, "that's impossible. He's a janitor. He barely speaks English." Evan didn't break eye contact with Hale. "Your Korean proposal mentions fluid thermal modeling systems, not minimal quality control. It also includes conditional retraining programs. And this so-called light staffing adjustments Mark is presenting, they're actually proposed layoffs of 400 workers." The room erupted. "What? Layoffs? That's not what Mark said." Richard Hale's face turned a dangerous shade of red. He looked at Mark with sudden suspicion. "Is this true?" Mark stammered, sweat beading at his hairline. Of course not. This kid doesn't know what he's talking about. He's trying to manipulate the situation, for money, for attention." "No," Evan said quietly. "I'm trying to keep you from making a catastrophic mistake." Silence snapped back into place. Every eye locked on him. Evan drew a slow breath. "My father, Daniel Carter, was a senior negotiator here before he was wrongfully terminated. He taught me to translate technical contracts before I was 12. Korean was my first language at home. I know this material better than anyone in this room." Hale blinked. "Daniel Carter." He leaned back. "I remember him." "That's convenient," Mark muttered under his breath. Evan ignored him. "Page 12, paragraph 2. SungTech requires enhanced thermal management protocols, not reduced oversight. Page 19 outlines 2 training phases for current workers, not mandatory layoffs. And this so-called summary you're presenting, Mark, is fabricated." The room buzzed like a hive on the verge of collapse. Mark burst out laughing, but it was a brittle, panicked sound. "Hale, come on. You can't seriously believe a janitor over your own CFO. He's lying, obviously lying." Evan reached into his pocket and pulled out his cracked phone. "Then explain this." He tapped the screen. Up popped the photo of the doctored contract, the version Mark had rewritten to mislead both Hale Technologies and Sungtech. Executives leaned forward, eyes widening. "What the hell? Is that real? Benson, what the hell is this?" Mark's face drained of color. That's taken out of context. He must have broken into my office. He's the one tampering with documents." "And this?" Evan swiped to the next image. The memo with Mark's signature recommending Evan's termination for credible espionage concerns. Hale's jaw clenched. "You filed a termination request before any investigation?"
Mark took a step back. "Hale, sir, I was protecting us. He's been accessing confidential material." "And you wrote to Homeland Security about his mother," Evan said quietly. A horrified gasp rippled across the table. Mark froze. That can't." Evan pulled up the email chain. On the screen, in black and white, "Prepare deportation inquiry, if necessary. M. Benson." Mark lunged for the phone, but Evan pulled it away. "Enough," Hale snapped. His voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a blade. Mark froze mid-step. "Is any of this true?" Mark opened and closed his mouth. No answer came. Security Chief Mercer stepped forward. "Sir," he said tightly, "I can confirm some of these documents match files we found on Benson's drive this morning." Hale's face went blank. Ice-cold blank. "Mark Benson, you're fired." It was the tone of a judge passing a sentence. Mark's knees buckled. No, Hale, you can't. This isn't security. Stop, he's lying. He's setting me up. He's a janitor." Two guards seized him by the arms. Mark twisted, screaming, humiliated beyond repair as they dragged him out. But Evan wasn't looking at him. He was staring at Richard Hale, waiting for the blow to land. Because even with Mark exposed, Evan had still trespassed, still accessed confidential materials, still broken rules. Hale's eyes locked onto him. "So," he said slowly, "you claim you can translate the entire proposal." Evan's voice almost failed, but he forced the words out. "I already translated about 60%. A hush fell. "And the night owl notes? All you?" Evan nodded. Hale exhaled. "Then my offer stands." He pointed at the thick Korean proposal. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Finish the full translation. Perfectly. Accurately." Executives whispered frantically. Evan steadied himself. "I want your offer in writing," he said, surprising even himself. "And my job protected. And my mother safe." Hale stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. "Fine. Draw up the contract." Evan's knees nearly gave out. It was happening. He had a real chance. Hale gestured to an unused conference room. "You'll work there. Whatever you need, you get." Executives watched in stunned silence as Evan picked up the proposal with trembling hands and headed toward the door. Mark was gone. The truth was out. The power dynamic had flipped, but the clock was still ticking. He had 18 hours to translate 40 dense pages, and if he failed, everything would collapse. What Evan didn't know was that someone else wasn't ready to let him win, and before sunrise, sabotage would strike again, this time aimed at destroying the translation and Evan's future in one move. The small conference room Hale assigned Evan felt more like a bunker than an office. No windows, a humming overhead light, a pot of stale coffee, a loaner laptop, a stack of fresh legal pads, a locked door that only Evan and 2 security guards could access. For the first time, he wasn't cleaning a room in this building. He owned this one, at least for tonight.
Hale's assistant, a stiff man named Jonathan, placed a printed contract on the table. This confirms your employment protection, your mother's immigration confidentiality, and the salary payout upon completion, he recited mechanically. Sign here, here, and... He signed before he finished speaking. He wasn't losing Mia. He wasn't letting his mother be taken. He wasn't letting Mark or anyone erase him. Jonathan slid him a key card. Security will guard the hallway. No one comes in without authorization. He nodded. Then he opened the Sun Tech proposal and began working. By 9 p.m., he had completed roughly 80% of the translation. By midnight, his eyes burned, the Korean characters blurred on the page. Every clause felt like a test of endurance. He drank cold coffee. He chewed gum. He replayed his father's voice. Precision is everything, Evan. Words decide wars, markets, and futures. He pressed on. At 2 a.m., he was halfway through the thermal architecture appendix when his phone buzzed. Neighbor. Your mom's doctor wants to keep her one more day. Hospital deposit needed, $2,200. His chest tightened. He had $14 in his bank account. He forced himself not to break. He had to finish this. This translation wasn't just for Hale. It wasn't just for Suntech. It wasn't even for the $31,600. It was for survival. His, Mia's, his mother's. He kept translating. At 3 a.m., his head began to droop. His eyelids trembled. He needed rest. Just 10 minutes. He laid his head on his folded arms. Just a moment, just to breathe. Darkness swept him under. A sudden crash jolted him awake. He gasped as hot liquid drenched the desk, coffee splattering across his printed notes, dripping down the laptop keyboard. He jerked back, heart slamming against his ribs. Standing over him was a familiar smirk. Mark Benson. Not fired Mark Benson, not escorted out by security Mark Benson. A furious, sweating, wild-eyed Mark Benson. I told you, he hissed, lowering the empty cup. You should have known your place. Evan's breath froze. Mark shouldn't be in the building. Security should have stopped him. Unless someone helped him get in. Oops, Mark said, feigning innocence. Clumsy me. I thought you looked tired. Thought I'd wake you. You, Evan's voice broke. You sabotaged? Of course I sabotaged you, Mark exploded, composure breaking. You think I'm letting some janitor destroy my career? You think I'm letting you become some corporate hero? Please. Evan lunged for the laptop. The screen flickered. Sparks popped, and it died completely. No, 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 Evan choked, tapping keys desperately. Mark folded his arms smugly. Don't worry, he said mockingly. I moved your files. For safekeeping. What files? Evan breathed. Oh, the ones you think you were working on. They're gone. Completely corrupted. A factory reset does wonders. You deleted them? Evan whispered. Let's call it leveling the field. Evan shook visibly. You won't get away with this. Mark laughed. I already did. He walked to the door, pausing dramatically. Good luck explaining to Hale why the janitor failed. They'll fire you at 9 a.m., and after that, you're going to lose your apartment, your sister, your mother.
Evan's fists curled until his nails broke skin. You're done, Mark, Evan whispered. Mark stopped. Funny, he said, turning slightly. That's exactly what I thought about you. Then he slipped out of the room. The door clicked shut behind him. Security didn't return. Evan stared at the ruined laptop, at the soaked notes, at the smeared ink. Everything he'd worked for, gone.
4 hours until deadline. His mother in the hospital. Eviction happening at sunrise. No translation. No backup. No escape. He dropped to his knees. For the first time since his father's death, he truly felt like he was drowning. His phone buzzed again. He almost didn't look. But then he saw the notification. Hospital. Your mother is stable for now, but she needs additional medication authorization. His hands trembled. He couldn't fail her. He couldn't fail Mia. He slammed his palms onto the floor, forcing his breath steady. He needed to think. He needed to fight. He suddenly remembered something. In his backpack, a forgotten notebook, his father's old binder, filled with handwritten diagrams, notes, and translations from his earliest work with semiconductor contracts. Information Suntech assumed Hale Technologies already understood. Information no translation software could replicate. Evan scrambled to his bag, pulling out the battered binder, its edges frayed, its pages warped from age. He flipped it open. Thermal modeling charts, Korean to English technical phrasing, legal clause breakdowns, architecture diagrams. He exhaled a shaking breath. This was the foundation of the very technology Suntech had just patented. His father had worked on the prototype before Suntech acquired the rights. Evan whispered, "Dad, help me one more time." He grabbed a fresh legal pad. He grabbed a working pen. He spread out the surviving documents, and he began rewriting the translation from scratch, using nothing but memory, instinct, and his father's notes. Minute by minute, clause by clause, word by word. The clock raced toward dawn, but Evan raced faster. At 8:58 a.m., with trembling hands, he walked toward the boardroom holding a thick stack of handwritten translations. Executives stared as he entered. Richard Hale narrowed his eyes. "You finished?" Evan set the pages down. "Yes." Hale flipped through the first few sheets. His eyes widened. Even the executives leaned in. This wasn't sloppy. This wasn't rushed. This was expert work. Hale's face hardened, jaw locked in concentration. "Where did you get this level of detail?" he demanded. Evan steadied himself. "My father," he said softly. "He worked on the original technology. These notes go beyond Suntech's proposal. They fill the gaps Suntech assumed you already understood." The room fell absolutely silent. Everyone waited for Hale's verdict. Seconds passed. Then, the video call with Suntech chimed online. They were early. Hale looked at Evan. "You stay." Evan's heart stopped, because when Suntech's CEO appeared on screen, his first words weren't to Richard Hale, but to Evan.
The massive boardroom screen flickered to life, revealing the polished interior of Suntech headquarters in Seoul. Executives in suits surrounded a long conference table, but the man in the center, Chairman Lee Hyun-soo, CEO of Suntech Microsystems, commanded the room effortlessly. Richard Hale straightened his tie, suddenly nervous. But Chairman Lee wasn't looking at Hale. His eyes drifted past the executives, past the directors, and landed directly on Evan. "Is that," Lee said in perfect English, leaning forward, "the translator?" The room tensed. Hale blinked. "Well, he's our janitor." A few executives cringed. But Lee's expression sharpened. "Ah," he nodded once. "Daniel Carter's son." Every molecule of air evaporated from the room. Evan's heart stopped. "How do you know my father?" A man seated next to Lee, a gray-haired engineer named Mr. Park, smiled warmly. "Your father was one of our early partners. He collaborated on the GX100 architecture long before Suntech bought the rights. He spoke often of his talented son who could translate semiconductor clauses before entering middle school." Evan's throat tightened. "My father admired him deeply," Lee added. "It seems his talent did not skip a generation."
All eyes turned to Evan. Hale's mouth hung slightly open. Mark Benson, if he hadn't been fired hours earlier, would have combusted. "Mr. Hale," Mr. Lee continued calmly, "we noticed someone was translating sections of our proposal with unusual precision, much more accurate than we expected from your team." Hale cleared his throat. "Well, yes, we have a diverse staff." That someone was Evan Carter. A quiet, "Oh my God," escaped one of the executives. Evan swallowed. I tried to help. I didn't want your contract to be misinterpreted." Mr. Lee leaned closer to the camera. "You did more than help. You identified ambiguities we deliberately inserted to test Hale Technologies' ethical alignment." The room froze again. Hale leaned forward, startled. "A test?" "Yes," Mr. Lee said. "Your company's internal ethics have been questioned since Daniel Carter's tenure. We wanted to see if your leadership would interpret our clauses honestly or manipulate them." Evan's pulse surged. Hale looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. Mr. Park raised a ghost of a smile. "And we also wished to see whether any hidden talent remained in your workforce." "That's unconventional," Hale said stiffly. "It is necessary," Lee replied. "Technology is more than hardware. It requires trust." Evan looked down at his father's binder resting against his leg. Trust. Something Hale Technologies had stripped from his family years ago. "Now," Mr. Lee continued calmly, "before we finalize anything, we'd like Evan Carter to summarize one key section in English so we may assess the accuracy of his translation." Every head snapped toward Evan. Hale whispered harshly, "Don't embarrass us." Evan ignored him. Mr. Lee gestured. "Page 22, paragraph 3, our discussion on thermal drift mitigation protocols." Evan didn't need to open the binder. He had memorized it hours ago. He spoke clearly. "SungTech recommends a 3-phase thermal drift mitigation protocol. Phase 1 requires establishing baseline tolerance levels within 2 degrees Celsius. Phase 2 adjusts the fluid modeling algorithm to compensate for temperature fluctuations caused by micro-load variations. Phase 3 integrates adaptive recalibration cycles every 90 seconds to maintain chip stability during peak processing." Silence. Then, slow nods across the SungTech boardroom. "Correct," Lee said, genuinely impressed. "More accurate than the revision your CFO submitted yesterday." Hale's face flushed crimson. "We never approved that revision," Hale sputtered. "We are aware," Lee said, with a polite smile. Mr. Park added gently, "Your company's internal corruption is not our concern. What matters is how you choose to proceed from this moment." Hale swallowed audibly. "And what does SungTech propose?" Lee folded his hands. "We will still offer you the contract, but only on one condition." A new tension filled the room. "And what condition is that?" Hale asked cautiously. Chairman Lee's voice lowered. "Evan Carter must oversee all cross-cultural communication between our companies." The Hale executives jolted upright. He's a janitor." "No," Lee corrected. "He is the most qualified linguist in your entire building, likely your entire company." "But he has no degree, no credentials, no corporate background." "He has accuracy," Lee said simply, "and integrity, 2 things far more rare." Hale looked at Evan with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. "So we hire him as a liaison?" "No," Lee replied. "He works for us, but through you, and we will pay him independently."
Evan stared. What? What do you mean? Lee lifted a document to the camera. Here is our consulting agreement. It includes a $40,000 onboarding bonus for you and a continuing monthly compensation package. You will coordinate all translation and cultural logistics between Sung Tech and Hale Technologies. Evan's knees nearly buckled. His entire world, his entire life was flipping upside down. Hale's voice was strangled. And if we refuse? Then we take our proposal to Samsung or Dynacore, Lee said calmly. They have already expressed interest. Panic swept the room. Hale looked like a man with a gun to his head. Finally, he said, "Fine. Evan Carter will serve as liaison." Chairman Lee smiled. "Excellent. Then let us begin." As the meeting continued, Evan stood silently, gripping his father's binder, emotions crashing over him like a storm. Shock, relief, unbelief, validation, fear, hope. The janitor had just been named the single most important person in a billion-dollar negotiation. But something else happened, too. Something darker. Because as the meeting wrapped, the security feed on the wall screen flickered for a moment, and Evan saw a shadowed figure stepping into the 25th floor hallway. Someone he thought was gone. Someone who wasn't supposed to be in the building. Someone who had nothing left to lose. Mark Benson. His eyes were filled with hatred, and he was walking straight toward Evan's conference room. Mark Benson had been fired, exposed, and humiliated, but now he was coming back for revenge. And this time, he wasn't sabotaging a translation. He was coming for Evan. The moment the Sungtech call ended, the boardroom erupted in frantic whispers. Hale barked orders, executives scrambled to adjust timelines, legal teams rushed in with modified contracts. It was corporate chaos. But Evan wasn't listening to any of it. He was staring at the security feed in the corner of the room. And the figure stepping onto the 25th floor, Mark Benson, eyes wild, jaw clenched, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled suit, now stained and torn. He moved with purpose, dangerous, deliberate purpose, heading toward Evan's conference room. Evan's pulse spiked. "He's not supposed to be here," he whispered. Richard Hale followed his gaze. "What? Who?" Before Hale finished, the screen glitched, then cut out completely. Security footage gone. Evan's stomach plummeted. Hale turned to Security Chief Mercer. "Why is he in the building? I thought we terminated his access." Mercer's face blanched. "We did. He shouldn't even be able to get past the lobby." That meant one thing. Mark had been let in. By someone who owed him, or someone who hated Evan, or someone who wanted chaos. "Secure the floor! Now!" Security rushed out, but Evan was already moving. He sprinted down the hallway, ignoring the shouts behind him. The building's fluorescent lights stretched like streaks in his peripheral vision. His heart pounded with every step. His mind raced faster. What did Mark want now? Revenge? Violence? To steal the documents? To destroy the translation he'd rebuilt overnight? To sabotage the contract completely? None of those mattered. Mark wanted Evan. When he reached his assigned conference room, he skidded to a halt. The door was open. His chest tightened. Slowly, he stepped inside. The room was a wreck. Papers thrown everywhere, chairs overturned, coffee dripping off the table, Evan's father's binder tossed across the floor. And in the center of it all stood Mark, holding Evan's silver translator pen as a weapon. "So, the janitor thinks he can take everything from me." Evan's voice was steady but quiet. "You destroyed yourself, Mark." "No," Mark snapped, pointing the pen at him like a dagger. "You destroyed me.
You humiliated me, fired me, exposed me, made me look like a fool in front of the entire board. You lied to the entire board. You put hundreds of workers' jobs at risk. You tried to get my mother deported. Mark's smile twisted unnaturally. Collateral damage, nothing personal. Evan stared. You ruined my father's life. Now you tried to do the same to me. Mark shrugged. That's corporate survival. That's corporate rot. Mark's eyes flashed. Oh, listen to the janitor trying to sound noble. You think you're some hero now because the Korean CEO praised you? You're still nothing. Then why are you so afraid of me? Evan asked. Mark froze. Because the truth had been spoken aloud. Mark was afraid, not of Evan the janitor, but Evan the threat. Evan the talent. Evan the proof that Mark was never as smart, as capable, or as indispensable as he claimed. Evan stepped forward carefully. Give me the pen. Mark gripped it tighter. You don't get to take anything else from me, he snarled. It was never yours. Mark lunged. Evan reacted on instinct, dodging sideways as Mark swung the pen downward, stabbing the air where Evan's shoulder had been moments before. What were you planning to do? Evan shouted, backing up. Attack me? In the building? After everything that's already happened? Mark laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. Why not? I have nothing left to lose. You took my job, my reputation, my future. You did all that to yourself. No, Mark screamed. It's your fault. He lunged again, but this time security burst through the doorway. Drop it, Mercer shouted. Mark whirled, startled. Too late. 3 security guards tackled him to the ground. The pen clattered across the floor. Mark screamed and thrashed as they cuffed him, his last fragments of dignity disintegrating into rage and humiliation. You'll regret this, Carter, he shouted as they dragged him out. I'll ruin you. The doors slammed shut. Silence. Finally, Evan let himself collapse into a chair, adrenaline draining out of him all at once. He picked up the pen. Cold, heavy, steadying. His mother's voice echoed softly in his mind. Wisdom is a torch. He stared at the binder on the floor, the scattered papers, the wrecked room. He had survived. Again. But he still had to face the board. He still had to secure the Sungtech contract. He still had to protect Mia and his mother. He stood, gathered his notes, and walked back toward the boardroom. Whatever came next, he would face it head on. He was done being invisible. Richard Hale stood by the boardroom window, looking uncharacteristically shaken as Evan returned. Benson has been detained, Hale said without turning. We found evidence of multiple breaches, multiple companies. He was selling us out for years. Evan nodded quietly. Hale turned to him. You saved us. Evan didn't respond. You saved this company, Hale repeated, almost incredulous. Evan looked him in the eyes. My father saved this company long before I did. You just didn't listen to him. Hale flinched, but didn't deny it. Your payment will be received this afternoon, Hale said stiffly, and Sungtech insists on your involvement moving forward. They've requested a dedicated workspace for you, a real one. Evan almost laughed. Am I still a janitor? Hale exhaled. No, he said finally. As of today, you're Director of Cross-Cultural Relations. Evan froze. That title,
That office, that authority, the same building that once ignored him now needed him more than anyone. Hale extended a hand. Evan looked at it, then shook it. History made, his father's legacy reclaimed, his family finally safe. Evan walked out of the boardroom with his head high, gripping the pen that started everything. But he wasn't prepared for what waited outside the door. His sister Mia stood there, backpack on, tears in her eyes, breath shallow from running. "Evan," she gasped, "you have to come with me, now." Evan kneeled instantly. "What's wrong?" "It's Mom," Mia cried. "Something happened. The hospital called." Evan's heart dropped. "What happened?" Mia shook her head, voice cracking. "They wouldn't tell me." She grabbed his hand. "Evan, she collapsed." The world spun. The pen slipped from his fingers. His future, the contract, the promotions, none of it mattered. Not now, not compared to the one person he hadn't saved yet. His mother. Evan had saved a company, exposed corruption, and rewritten his own destiny. But now he was about to face a battle no translation, no contract, and no promotion could fix.
Evan didn't wait for permission, didn't wait for explanations, didn't wait for security or Hale or anyone. He grabbed Mia's hand and ran. Down the hallway, into the elevators, out to the street. His breathing thundered in his ears as they raced toward the hospital. A taxi screeched to a halt. He shoved Mia inside and jumped after her. "St. Luke's," he shouted. The driver sped off. Mia trembled beside him, tears streaking down her cheeks. She just collapsed," she whispered. "The nurse said she was asking for you." Evan swallowed hard, throat tight. His mother had always been strong, even after his father died, even when she worked 2 jobs, even when the stress broke her health, even when she could no longer walk without help. He had seen her cry only twice, when his father died and the day they were evicted the first time. But collapse? That word terrified him. He squeezed Mia's hand. "I'm here. We'll get through this, I promise." But inside, fear coiled like a living thing. Because what if he had waited too long? What if all of this, Sungtech, the contract, Hale, the translation, what if none of it mattered because he failed the one person who mattered most? The taxi screeched into the hospital driveway. Evan and Mia bolted inside, rushing to the front desk. "Min Carter, room, status, please." The nurse recognized Mia immediately. "They're stabilizing her now," she said gently. "She fainted during physical therapy. Her blood pressure crashed." Mia sobbed. Evan's stomach twisted. "She kept saying her son would fix everything. She said you were close." Evan nodded, eyes burning. They were rushed to the ICU hallway. Machines beeped behind the glass. Doctors moved like shadows. Evan pressed his forehead to the cold window. His mother lay on the bed, pale, small, tubes running across her arms. The same woman who used to carry groceries with one hand and correct his Korean homework with the other, now looked impossibly fragile. He felt Mia's hand slip into his. "Can we see her?" The doctor approached. "You can go in," she said softly, "but only for a few minutes." Evan stepped in first. Every breath hurt. He sat at his mother's bedside and took her hand. Her skin was warm, but weak. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm here." Her eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, she opened her eyes and smiled. "Oh, my sweet boy, I knew you would come." Evan laughed through tears. "What happened? Why didn't you call me sooner?" She murmured,
I didn't want to distract you. You had work. He shook his head fiercely. Nothing is more important than you. Nothing. She raised a hand and touched his cheek. You look tired, she whispered. Have you been studying again? He let out a shaky breath. Something like that. Her gaze drifted to the silver translator pen in his hand. Her eyes widened. You found it. Evan nodded. It helped me today. You helped me. She squeezed his hand weakly. I always told you, wisdom is a torch. Evan bowed his head. Yes, and I finally used it. Her breathing eased, but her voice grew softer. You're going to do great things, Evan. Bigger than you imagine. He leaned closer. Mom, Sungtech wants me to be their cultural liaison. They offered me a salary, a signing bonus, a real position. Her eyes shone. I told your father, our son will build bridges between worlds. He swallowed. We won't lose the apartment. You won't lose care. Mia will be okay. I promise you. She nodded, tears glistening. I never worried. I knew you would rise, even from the lowest places.
Evan bent forward and hugged her gently, careful not to disturb the wires. I love you, Mom. I love you too, my brilliant boy. The doctor returned. She needs rest now, she said softly. Her condition is improving. The collapse was from exhaustion, not system failure. She'll recover. Evan exhaled shakily. For the first time in years, he felt the crushing weight on his chest ease. His mother was safe, truly safe. 2 days later, Evan stood in Hale Technologies' lobby, not as a janitor, not in a uniform, but in a crisp button-down shirt with a new badge clipped to his belt. Evan Carter, Director of Cross-Cultural Relations, Hale Technologies. He walked past employees who now greeted him by name, past executives who once ignored him, past security who now nodded respectfully. He took the elevator to the top floor, his floor. His new office had a glass wall overlooking the city, a real desk, a real salary, a future. He placed his mother's translator pen in a small stand on his desk, a symbol of where he came from and how far he rose. Mia called on video chat from school. Bro, your office looks like a spaceship. Mom says she wants to visit as soon as she's released. Evan smiled. I want her to. And you too. This, he gestured around him, belongs to all of us. Just then, Richard Hale walked in. Carter, Hale said, clearing his throat. Sungtech is waiting upstairs. They want to finalize the expansion plan. Evan nodded, gathering his papers. I'm ready. Hale paused. You know, I misjudged you. You weren't invisible. I just wasn't looking. Evan met his gaze. Then it's time you start. They walked side by side, CEO and former janitor, toward the conference room. A new beginning, a new identity, a new future. As he entered the meeting, Chairman Lee smiled broadly. Ah, our bridge between worlds has arrived. Evan took his seat at the head of the table, confident, seen, valued. He opened the final proposal with steady hands. Let's begin. And just like that, the janitor became the architect of a billion-dollar alliance.